And a string of court orders have blocked the Trump administration from a federal funding freeze. Despite that, money is still being withheld, prompting dozens of lawsuits and raising some questions about the power of the executive branch. One agency feeling the effect, USAID. The Trump administration says it is complying with the restraining order and points to a loophole that allows them to terminate contracts and effectively freeze some funds. Joining us now is federal defense attorney Ronald Chapman. Ronald, great to have you. I'm really interested on your take regarding this story. You know, the judge who implemented this restraining order has not responded to USAID's filing just yet. What do you make of the Trump administration's argument here, and how do you believe the judge will ultimately respond?
Yeah, my understanding is that there's a motion filed to find the government in contempt for cutting a lot of these contracts. I think that there were billions in cuts. There's maybe about 250 million left. So they've cut a ton of these contracts. But here's what the Trump administration has said. They said that these contracts have allowed us to actually terminate them for various reasons. And some of the reasons might be DEI policies, violations of executive orders that were actually just created recently. But they argue that the contracts allow a cut. And here's why the judge might have to allow it. The judge is not able to get involved in the private contract rights of these entities as well as the federal government. And the judge can't order USAID to breach its own contracts. And that would be considered kind of a violation of the separation of powers if the judge stepped in and said, I'm going to kind of rewrite these contracts and rewrite the law here. So that's not going to happen. It's very possible that the administration may get away with these cuts, and this spending is effectively gone without any contempt or any violation.
Yeah, and to your point, you know, the Trump administration filed its argument this week saying they have legal authority to freeze foreign aid without the executive order, and will continue to do so until they get some clarification from the court. When do you see that happening? Do you see it happening? And also, do you believe the judge may alter his restraining order in any way?
Yeah, it's very possible. So we have this initial restraining order, but then there's going to be a hearing, I think, set in the near future on an injunction. And that's a hearing where evidence can be presented, and the judge will have the ability to go over these contracts, in fact, probably line by line, to see if the administration is violating this order. I expect that to happen relatively soon. If that does happen, that would be a final order from which you can have an appeal. We could see cases like this from various districts skyrocket all the way to the Supreme Court, with the Supreme Court making the decision. And if I had to guess, I would imagine a relatively conservative Supreme Court is going to say that the president has the ability under these contracts to likely make the cuts, provided that those contracts contain the clauses the administration says they do.
Well, speaking to that potential outcome, you know, do you believe an outcome here may be precedent setting when we talk about other executive orders challenged through the courts now?
Yeah, this is a very interesting issue. So we have the Trump administration taking a position that most of these contracts from USAID do not really follow the law because this doesn't really flow from Congress, right? The people haven't had the ability to say that they want these contracts and actually vote on somebody who is in office in order to execute them, because a lot of these programs have been created and they're sort of behemoths and they're not under the thumb of the executive. And Trump is trying to strip that executive power. I think the Supreme Court will be relatively kind to that sort of request. We've seen a relatively limited government Supreme Court so far, and any limitations to the executive power and any strengthening of the right to contract, I think, is going to be looked upon favorably by the current composition of the Supreme Court.
All right. One to follow for sure. Ronald Chapman, thank you for weighing in.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. Also, don't forget to click that red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.